Crybaby. Okay, I shouldn't have done it. I was stupid. Who's responsible for that? Said Mr. Kempsey. He was pointing at the pinboard. Crybaby, said one of the kids. Stand up, Gavin, said Mr. Kempsey. He needn't have asked me to stand up. I'd been standing all week. I faced the class. Outside the window I could see the desert stretching off into the distance. I wished I was there. Did you do that drawing? Said Mr. Kempsey. He knew it was mine, that's why he was asking. I nodded my head. Now, he said, tell us how you did it. Everyone looked at the wall where my picture was pinned. I'd called it elephant ears because that's what it looked like. Well, said Mr. Kempsey, we're waiting. He knew how I did it, otherwise he wouldn't have been asking. I breathed deeply. Last week I went into the staff room after school, I said. Yes, he growled. Then I pulled down my pants and sat on the photocopier and pressed the button. Well, you've never heard anything like it. The class cracked up. They laughed till the tears ran down their faces, and I just stood there feeling stupid. My face was red and so was my burnt bottom. Mr. Kempsey didn't laugh, though. He suspended me from school for a week. Mum didn't laugh either. She went on and on and on about it, the way parents always do. That's the worst of being a kid. You never know when you're going to cop it. You can get into trouble at any time. 1 minute everything's fine and then boom, you're dead meat. Things can turn nasty just when you least expect it. Like what happened the next day after the elephant ears and Mr. Kempsey. Let me put you in the picture. I had to stay home from school. Mum wouldn't talk to me, so I moped around feeling awful. After she went out, I did a whole heap of jobs without even being asked. I tried to make up for what I'd done. When I finished the washing up, I stood in the lounge and watched TV. Mum had left a new writing pad on the coffee table. Now that might not seem like much to you, but you have to remember that she once told me this. Gavin, you're never to touch this writing pad. It was Aunt Nellie's and there are only a few pages left. They are precious pages. Aunt Nellie had drowned when she paddled her canoe in front of a ship carrying rainforest timber. The boat broke her canoe in half and she was never seen again. And Mum kept Aunt Nellie's picture on the kitchen wall and she often stood staring at it. Anyway, like I said, I was standing there watching TV, a movie called The Old Man and the Sea. And the writing pad was on the coffee table. It was made of delicate thin paper with a design on top. Trees, a lovely forest spreading across the top of the page. I wanted a closer look. I didn't want to write in it. I didn't want to tear out a page. I just wanted a look. There was nothing wrong with that really, was there? So I picked it up and sat down. Now, you're going to find out why they call me Crybaby. See, all week I've been forgetting about my burnt behind. And every time I sat down it hurt so much the tears sprang into my eyes. As you probably guessed, the tears started to flow right down onto Mum's special writing pad. Even though I jumped up straight away, the whole thing was drenched. I mopped up the tears, but it was no good. The trees were all bent and twisted and the leaves were running off the branches. The paper was wet and stained. My heart started to thump. This was it. This was death. I was gone. First the elephant ears and now the paper. Mum was going to kill me. I thought about rushing down the street to buy another pad, but I knew that I'd never find one. Aunt Nellie's pad was as old as the hills. My stomach felt weak. Any time now Mum would come back. I went outside to see if there was any sign of her. And Grandpop was in the front yard packing up his truck for another venture into the desert. What are you looking for this time? I asked. He held up a photo. The best one, he said. The water-holding frog. He was so excited that his hands were shaking. All his life he'd wanted to find a specimen of the water-holding frog. His old face was wrinkled by a huge smile. His eyes twinkled. This was going to be his 10th trip looking for this frog. I was scared that he was going to die before he found one. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes because the thought of it was so sad. I tried to get my mind off it by thinking of something else. That wasn't hard, I just thought about what Mum was going to do to me when she came home. Did I ever tell you about the water-holding frog? Grandpop asked. I nodded, but he started telling me again anyway. This frog, he said, lives in the desert
Before the summer comes, it fills itself up with water and burrows into the ground. It can stay down there for years and years waiting for the rain. Then one day the rains come, and water seeps through the sand and wakes up the sleeping frog. It burrows out and sings in the rain. Wonderful! It's marvellous!"
He was all excited. His whiskers were fairly bristling with joy. Grandpop slammed the door of the truck and took out his keys.
"Tell your mother that I'll be back the day after tomorrow,"
he said in his creaky old voice. He jumped into the truck and started up the engine. A cloud of dust was approaching in the distance. It was Mum's Land Rover. I felt sick inside. I couldn't face her. Okay, I shouldn't have done it. It was stupid. But I did. I pulled open the back door of Grandpop's truck and climbed in. I knelt down and hid under a blanket. I was careful not to sit on my burnt bottom, I can tell you that. The truck was full of exploring equipment. A curtain was drawn across behind Grandpop's seat. I felt quite safe snuggled down among the tents and pans. The roar of Mum's Land Rover went by outside. I had to stay hidden until we reached our destination. If Grandpop found me before we got there, he'd just turn back. And the truck bumped and jolted. It was hot and I started to get thirsty. And Grandpop started to sing. He was making up the words as he went. It was a sad little song about the water-holding frog. It told how the raindrops fell and woke up the sleeping frogs.
"Oh, what a sight that would be,"
he said to himself. Suddenly, more than anything else in the world, I wanted to help Grandpop find a water-holding frog before he died. Being in Mum's bad books didn't seem important at all anymore. I was so excited that I even forgot how thirsty I was. The truck bumped on and on. I lay on my stomach in the back, dreaming that I would be the one to find the water-holding frog. Grandpop would be happy. Mum would be happy too because she loved Grandpop so much. She probably wouldn't even go crook at me about running away or ruining the writing pad. I had to find a water-holding frog for everyone's sake. Just then I heard a blast from a horn. I peeped out the back and saw two blokes in a hotted-up car. It was a red Ford with big fat tyres. The driver was trying to make Grandpop go faster. The dirt road was narrow and they couldn't get past. They were really mean-looking guys. The driver was covered in tattoos and the bloke next to him was picking his nose and glaring at us at the same time. Poor old Grandpop.
All right, he said in a trembling voice. "I'm going as fast as I can."
I could hear him through the curtain that he had stretched behind the front seat. He couldn't see me staring out the back. But the two men in the Ford could. Okay, I shouldn't have done it. I was stupid. But I just couldn't help myself. I bent one finger and held the knuckle up under my nose. It looked like my finger was going right up inside my nostril. Then I twisted my wrist with the other hand, pointing at the guy who was picking his nose. Well, he went right off. His face turned red. The big Ford suddenly lurched off the road and tore past in a swirl of dust. And the driver blasted his horn and cut us off. And the truck bumped and skidded on the edge of the road. For a second I thought we were going to turn over. But we didn't. Somehow or other, Grandpop managed to keep the truck on the road.
"Idiots!"
he yelled as the Ford disappeared into the distance. I sure hoped we weren't going to meet those blokes again. My throat was parched. There was a water barrel in the back, but I couldn't get to it without shifting some boxes. Grandpop might hear me. After another 4 hours, the truck stopped. I heard Grandpop get out, and I peeped through the window and saw that we were at one of those lonely little petrol stations in the middle of the desert. A big sign said, "Last stop before Alice Springs." Behind the sign, I saw a red Ford parked in the shade. Grandpop started filling the truck with petrol. This was my chance to get a drink. The water was in a large drum with a tap at the bottom. I grabbed a mug and filled it up. Boy, I was thirsty. I drank mug after mugful. I was just filling my fourth mug when I heard shouting. I peeped outside. The big tattooed guy and his mate were pushing Grandpop around. They had his hat and were throwing it to each other. Poor old Grandpop had no one to help him, except me. I forgot all about the water that was pouring into the mug. I just dropped everything and leaped out of the car. And Grandpop jumped and hopped like a little kid trying to get his hat back. He was really old and I could see it was hard for him to move. His breath came out in noisy wheezes and sweat pouring down his cheeks. Or was it tears? Now, I'm quite good at basketball, if I do say so myself. I took a flying leap up onto the back of the tattooed one and snatched the hat. He fell down in the dust and to his knees. Grandpop was amazed to see me.
Gavin!
He yelled, half happy, half mad. The two big guys came towards us. They were not half happy and they were not half mad. They were completely furious. They started to walk towards us. We backed away. But at that exact moment, the owner of the garage came out. He was the biggest man I have ever seen. His legs were like tree trunks. His fists were like boulders.
What's going on?
He said.
Oh, nothing,
said the nose picker. Both men headed towards their car, muttering beneath their breath. As they drove off, I held my knuckle up to my nose for one more time. They saw me, but they kept going. I felt quite safe standing there with the giant next to me. Lucky for us, we never saw him again. Grandpop gave me a big lecture, but I could see that he was glad to have me there. He went inside the garage and rang Mum. I waited outside feeling nervous. After a bit, Grandpop came out.
She said you can come with me,
he said. Did she say anything else? I asked.
He gave me a wink. She said she's busy writing letters on her new pad.
Phew, what a relief she wasn't angry with me anymore. Now we could get on with it and find a water-holding frog. It was good not to be in any trouble. It was good not to feel guilty for messing things up. I climbed into the back of the truck and knelt behind Grandpop's seat. And we headed off into the burning desert, which was nearly as hot as my burning bottom. Neither of us knew that I'd left the water tap turned on in the back. Grandpop was so pleased to have me.
That water-holding frog will amaze you, he said. The rain falls after the drought, it soaks into the ground, and the little frog digs its way up.
He was so happy it was enough to bring tears into your eyes. I wasn't so sure, though. I looked out at the bleached desert. It was the middle of summer. How will you find a frog? I said. They'll all be under the ground.
Dig, he said. The ground will be rock hard, and digging is the only way.
We turned off the main road and headed across the hot red earth. Spinifex and mulga bushes were the only plants in the barren soil. Grandpop often stopped to check his compass. Each time he did, we had a swig from his water bottle. He sure got thirsty out there in the middle of nowhere. I loved the feel of that cool water trickling down my throat. After 4 hours, we reached the waterhole. I say waterhole, but of course at that time of year it was only a clay pan, just a shallow dry hole. The truck bumped to a stop.
Just in time, said Grandpop. The radiator's boiling.
Sure enough, clouds of steam came whooshing out of the bonnet.
It doesn't matter, he said. I've brought plenty of water.
We went around to the back of the truck to unpack. You know what I said about never knowing when you were going to be in trouble? Well, when Grandpop found out that we had no water, it was worse than ever. Once again I'd mucked things up. He didn't go crook because I left the tap on. He didn't tell me off. He just stood there looking very worried. Very worried indeed. In a way, it was worse than being yelled at. I felt terrible. It was all my fault. What will we do? I said.
We stay here, replied Grandpop. The first rule in the desert is to stay with your vehicle. Someone will come and look for us.
No one knows where we are, I said.
I know roughly where we are, he said. Anyway, we don't have a choice. A car is no good without water, and we don't have a drop to spare.
I tried to cheer him up a bit. We can look for the water-holding frog while we wait, I said. He shook his head.
We have to conserve our energy. All we can do is wait for help without moving too much.
I felt so guilty. Now he was never going to find his water-holding frog, and it was all my fault. We put a canvas shelter on the side of the truck to stop the heat of the sun. Grandpop handed me the water bottle.
Take 2 swigs, he said.
I held back my head and took 2 swigs. I couldn't have taken 3 swigs even if I'd wanted to. There was none left. Grandpop had given me the last of the water. That's the sort of bloke he was. I wondered how long we could last with nothing to drink. Grandpop would go first. I was young and strong. He was old and weak. What if I lived and he died? I couldn't bear the thought of it. Hours passed. Night crept up. Mosquitoes whined. Things moved in the night. The moon rose. It became cold, and we wrapped ourselves in blankets. The next morning it grew hot quickly. My mouth was dry and dusty. I could hardly swallow. Grandpop dozed and mumbled. He seemed to be off in a dream. The sun rose higher and higher.
"Frog, little water-holding frog,"
mumbled Grandpop. His eyes were wild. He didn't seem to know what was going on. The heat was getting to him. He crawled on his hands and knees into the middle of the clay pan. He started scratching the sand with his bent fingers.
"Frog, little frog,"
he croaked. I gently led him back to the shade. "I'll get you a frog," I said. Only one thought filled my mind. Find Grandpop a water-holding frog. I didn't care about being rescued. I didn't care whether I lived or died. Grandpop was off his head, but it didn't make any difference. All I wanted was to put one of those frogs in his hand. Everything was my fault. He would die soon without water. I knew that. I had to grant his lifelong wish. I had to find one of those frogs. I grabbed the shovel and trudged off into the middle of the clay pan. I whacked the point down into the ground. Wham! It was as hard as a rock. The shock hurt my fingers. The hot sand shimmered. Flies buzzed around my eyes. Dust covered my skin. But on I dug, on and on. Each time I hit the ground with the shovel, I collected a small pile of sand. "Frog," I said. "Little frog, where are you?" But there was no answer. The water-holding frogs were all buried deep, waiting for the first drops of water to fall and wake them from their long sleep. My fingers started to bleed. Large blisters grew and burst on my palms. I'd managed to dig out a hole about the size of a shallow bath, but still no frog. It was no good. I would never find one. My tongue felt like a piece of shriveled leather. Grandpop lay there in the shade. I could tell he was still alive because his chest was going up and down, but he didn't have much longer to go. Not without water. I had to find a water-holding frog before it was too late. I couldn't give up. Grandpop mumbled to himself,
"Little frog, little water-holding frog."
I wrapped a rag around my blistered hand and started to dig again. Painfully, slowly, bending, scraping, digging only a few grains at a time. My head started to spin. It was no good. I just couldn't lift the shovel anymore. I tried to dig with my grazed fingers, but they made no impression on the baked ground. It was useless. I couldn't go on. I stood and looked at the empty horizon. Grandpop would never get his water-holding frog. He would die without his dream coming true. And it was all my fault. It was so sad. Okay, I shouldn't have done it. It was stupid. I sat down in despair. Wow, did my bottom sting. It was still red and sore. The pain was terrible. Tears streamed down my nose and plopped into the hard ground. A regular waterfall of tears. A little wet patch formed on the sand just beneath my cheek. Suddenly, in the middle of the damp sand, a small green leg appeared. And then another. My tears had woken a water-holding frog from its sleep. 2 eyes blinked at me. 2 wonderful, wonderful eyes. "I've got one, Grandpop," I screamed. "I've got one." I gently picked up the glistening frog. I walked over to Grandpop and placed the tiny creature in his hand. I wouldn't have believed that one little frog could have had such an effect. Grandpop leaned up and gave the biggest grin I've ever seen. He looked at me with love in his smile. Love for me and the frog. We both had tears in our eyes. It was such a magic moment that neither of us noticed the storm clouds gathering. We just sat looking at that frog until the first raindrops fell, and the pool began to fill. The songs of 1,000 frogs filled the air. It was a real downpour. The heavens seemed to be weeping as I stood there and rubbed my behind. "Cry, baby," I said to the sky. "Cry, baby, cry."